Hello, dear hearts, and welcome. And this week, I am very excited and privileged to share my guest with you. She is Judith Kusel, and she is an amazing beacon of light based in South Africa. She is what I would call a multi-dimensional librarian. She is able to access the Akashic Library, the Galactic Library, and the Cosmic Library. And in truth, she is a living library herself and is bringing through all this amazing information through her wonderful conversations with other light beings around the planet, and through her courses and through her books. So welcome, Judith. Thank you so much for sharing this platform with me today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, it's amazing times that we live in. And yeah, I'm so grateful to be invited by you and having this beautiful connection, and also connection through crystals. And it's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Let's begin by taking you back to when you were a librarian in South Africa and looking at how you were a human librarian, let's say, and how over time and over your awakening, you have become a multi-dimensional librarian. Can you share?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, can you share a bit more?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've always wanted, since I can remember, I always was one. I was searching for truth. I was searching for that something that I didn't always could define. And of course, being librarian, I was always happy because I would ask questions, and the books would literally fall off the shelves. I would open them up, and then I would just randomly, and the answers would just jump out at me. And I was thought to myself, so I was all my life, I was led to answers. And it's what the librarianship did. It opened my mind, because it opened me up to all possibilities and understanding, that we are multi-dimensional beings, and there's so much that we do not understand and we do not grasp and we have forgotten about, but it's there. And I've always been fascinated by ancient civilizations, like in Egypt and the pyramids, etc. Because I even when I was 7 years old, I remember that I was my great aunt was my teacher, and we did the pyramids, and it was said that the pyramids were built by the slaves, and I sort of said to her, that's not true, and that's not true. And of course, I got so wrapped over the fingers because I dared say, it was not true, and question the teacher, because in South Africa at that time, in the apartheid years, you were not allowed to question anybody. What was your teacher? You were not allowed to question your parents, and you were not allowed to question the government. So. But what it has, I see that now as a preparation for the ultimate work that I was supposed to do. So in 2004, my life started literally to crash in, because things just happened in around my workplace, which at that stage, it was terrible, because I literally had my old life dying on me in a lot of respects. The proverbial carpet being pulled under me. And then in 2008, I literally got to the stage where because they put me into the museum in the interim, and then I was doing the archives there, and then they put me back into the library. But I knew this was not working anymore. And I remember that I actually stood at the edge of the cliff in my higher state with my higher guides, and I was shown that down in the valley there were thousands of people down below. And they said to me, how long are you going to stand at the edge of this cliff and not have the guts to finally go and do what you are called to do? And then they showed me, how does an eagle learn to fly? By its mother kicking it out of its nest. And it just needs to find its wings to fly. And the next day I put in my resignation, and it was just like this huge... something had been taken off me. It was like the burden had been taken off me, but I had no idea where I was going. And so on. All I knew is that at that stage, with all that happening, my third eye was opening up. I was suddenly sort of reading energy and energy fields. And with it, I was starting to see things I've never seen before. At that stage, I thought, well, I'm going cuckoo or something because I didn't know. And I had nobody to mentor me through all of this. So it was just like having a leap of faith and understanding that. And then I started to, they said to me, well, get an atlas. And I said, well, I haven't got an atlas. And then I went and bought an atlas. And I started to draw the energy lines in Africa, which became part of my book that I wrote Why I Was Born in Africa. But at that stage, I had no idea why I was doing this. And then they said, well, and this is now, these are, and then I was drawing in the pyramids, and I was drawing in the crystal pyramids as I was showing them. I was drawn in the 33-degree longitude line, which is the spinal column of the earth. And I was doing the energy work, Wyatt. And then I said to him, and then I knew I had to go and write this book. So I said, okay, well, where do I start? And funnily enough, I took the page and we opened it up there where the map of South Africa was. And my pen landed in exactly where I'm living now. But I've never been here. So I knew that is where my journey had to start. So I got into my car and I just started my journey. And my journey became actually the activation of the crystal pyramids again, and the whole activation of the pyramid grids, and also the crystalline pyramid grids, and the 33-degree longitude line. And as I did that, I started to tap into the energy fields and downloading information from them, because all information is stored energetically. It's not stored in any computer. It's not stored in a book. The actual, the whole omniverse, all the information of ever that's been created is stored in energy fields. And we always had the ability to read it, but when we fell from Atlantis after the flood, we just could not access that anymore because our higher transmitter channels were absolutely closed down. And yeah, so that became a journey of my life. And eventually I discovered that, I did actually the Diana Cooper Angels and Archangel course at that stage, because I've always been interested in Diana Cooper's work. And then I always use the Angel Oracle cards. And one day I just realized I don't need them. I just need people's, date of birth, and I need their names. And then I can go into their records and I can download it. But I cannot download it, like I don't transmit that energy, like and channel it. What I do is I type it out. It just goes through me and typing out. So, and afterwards I've got no recall of it. But so that became my life. And now that I'm actually in it, the more information that comes through, the more I immediately write it down, or I record it in my journals, and it always gets confirmed in some way or other. So that's been my journey.
Did you find that you were able to access the Akashic first, or did it all happen simultaneously for you?
I don't read the Akashic. I read the divine records, the intergalactic or universal records that you find. I didn't know that at the time, but but when I was starting to understand that what I was accessing was not in any. You see, the Akashic is actually sort of connected to planet Earth. You see. And then you get the solar records, and you get the galactic records, and then you get the universal records. And I through my soul, but I've been told that I am that anyway at soul level, and that is why I can access it. So I was never trained in reading the Akashic or anything like that. It just happened. And it happened to me, I think, because I was working with the energy fields, and I was working with the crystalline energy grids. So in other words, by doing that, I was opening my soul faculties. I was trusting what my soul was accessing, even though I don't always understood, but I took it on faith. I think that gift was just returned to me. And then I started to understand that the information that came through with my readings was not of this earth. It was actually went right directly into what the soul in truth is and whatever. But it's interesting because in the last few years that even has escalated, because the readings that I do now, in Fine, are even far more powerful than the ones that I started, because I'm accessing now the universal records in a much higher degree. And I'm finding it with the new children, for instance, who have got no connection with planet Earth, that I can go right into their galactic history because I've got access to that.
That's so wonderful. I'm so excited also because I'm on your waiting list at the moment for a soul reading for me and my two sons. And so I'm really excited to see how all of that intertwines as well. And I heard you speaking about this in another interview where you were speaking about reading for families is becoming a new thing as well for you, which is even expanding the readings even more and bringing more information through.
Mm. I did one this morning. I normally don't recall it, but I recall it that the information was so profound what this boy was bringing in, that he literally had the abilities now that in engineering and in aerodynamics and aero engineering that he was bringing to Earth for the new through the new Earth. You see, where we will be back into the intergalactic fold, where we will have space travel again, but not like we think, but in a much higher way than we didn't, like we had in the beginning, but now don't have anymore. And when afterwards I looked at this boy's name and I realized that the mother had given him exactly the right name. So, in other words, he must have, because you see, before souls actually, when the minute that they conceive, the soul already attaches to the mother. Okay, and the soul will always convey that name that it wishes to be known on earth, or to the mother or to the father. I experienced that with my own niece. She's my goddaughter, but before when she conceived, I just about 3 months before he was born, he appeared to me and he said to me, "I want to be known as this. This is the name that I want to be known as. I will be very tall. I am bringing information into the world which nobody else can bring in, but that's why I'm here." And then I actually just sent her that information, and she did give him the name that he wants. He turned out to be exactly as he said. He's exceptionally tall for his age. And even when he was, in his toddler and before 5 years old, all he wanted was jigsaw puzzles and anything that was as complicated as possible, and chess and things that he wanted to play, where he could literally use all his genius in order to activate it. So to me, it shows you that these kids are highly advanced. They haven't got karma like we all have, so they don't need to go through all that spiel that we still have to work through in our lifetimes with other souls and all the negative patterns we created, etc. They're free from that, and they're absolutely bringing in a totally new life and living to planet Earth.
That's beautiful, and I understand about the name coming through first. It was true with my first son. His name came through 6 months before he was born, and it was very clear. But with my second, it wasn't so clear. I had a name, but it wasn't sitting perfectly yet. And after he was born, it took time for him to grow into it, if that makes sense. It felt like that. It was still like an adjustment period. um, because it's the frequency as well. There's a frequency in the name as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is important.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I can see that and fully understand. Um, so can you share with us a little bit about um, Africa and everything that you've experienced and you're sharing in your book? Um, Everything that you discovered about the history of Africa and the importance of the story of how the earth began, through brings us to Africa too. And I'm also feeling with Africa that Africa will be pivotal in our future too, assisting us to remember ancient technologies and bringing those through for the future?
That has been confirmed actually again for me in the last few weeks because I've been working intensely with Africa again. Africa actually is the first continent, but you must remember that the inner Earth, there is an inner Earth civilization, and that used to be like a satellite that was created by the intergalactic fleet, so that when they went through the solar system, they needed like a station, what that could supply like food and etc., but also where they could repair their craft if they needed to. So at that stage, this is called Agartha. So that's the inner Earth. It still exists, but it's much higher than we are in civilization, and it's in the seventh dimensional state. So they've never left. They've always been there. We've just forgotten, but people know about it because, a lot of ancient tradition tell you about it, even modern ones. Then the intergalactic, when you reach a certain degree of evolutionary knowing, you actually can become a co-creator with the divine. So the intergalactic fleet basically sent their scientists, the top scientists, and they then created the outer Earth, the crust of the Earth. So in other words, that is the outer crust of planet Earth on which we live now. And if you actually read the Egyptian, the books of Thoth, or Thoth, whatever they call him, who was also Hermes, known as Hermes, you would say that in the book he actually says, I put down the energy lines. In other words, he was one of those scientists that put down the original energy lines and the original, what they call the web of light. Okay. And so these were inbuilt into that crust of the earth. And with that, they also built at the same time, they built the crystalline energy grids with crystal pyramid temples, which they put at certain places in the earth. So that these were actually they're not only like powerhouses, but they were temples as well. So this whole thing was connected. You could literally use the energy of the earth in a natural way, and you could power your craft, you could power your homes, you could power literally anything you wanted from it. So it was natural energy that was in the earth that you could utilize. And it was a spiraling energy, which is what Tesla coiled his coil, or it's called Tesla's coil or whatever. That's why in ancient texts, you always have a reference to the serpent. The serpent here is not a snake, but it's a coil, because the snake makes coil, that it's the same, the spiral. Anyway, now, in the beginning, when this was created, there was only one single continent. Now, the geologists talk about the supercontinent because they've actually figured it out. They said in the beginning, there was just one single continent. At the moment, they're still trying to put all the pieces together, because you must remember that the earth in the meantime has been for so many upheavals and shifts and polar shifts, etc. So some continents have just drifted apart, some have sunk under the sea, some have risen. So doesn't look the same as it used to be. But Africa still holds that. In other words, the African continent is still exactly in place where she used to be. The rest just fell off her. And with that, the African continent holds a 33 degree, longitude line. That is the spinal column of the earth. It's actually the line, like your spinal column is your lightning rod, but it's also your tuning fork. So in other words, through the spinal column, we are tuned into the solar and galactic levels and universal levels, because this is also the frequencies of sound, it's the frequencies of light, it's the frequencies of enlightenment, if you can call it that. But it's through this that we actually are like an entity in the greater entity. In other words, we're not just something that is there on its own and it's forgotten about. We are part of everything that ever existed. Now, when all of this was created, they started to bring in, like the Pleiadians brought in the plants, they brought in the trees, because they're the botanists of the intergalactic council. Then you had, for instance, like the whales and the dolphins, they came from Sirius. So everybody within the galactic core actually contributed in some way. And this was an experiment to see how life would adjust on the outer crust of the earth, not the inner, but now the outer crust. So you must remember that even the animals that volunteered to come here, they volunteered to come. It wasn't just say, okay, now we take you and we put you here. They gave permission at some stage to say, okay, we want to be part of this experiment. So the scientists that created this, they fell in love with the earth because she was so beautiful. They said she was like the crown jewel of creation. She was so beautiful. So everybody that passed here in the great motherships or the craft would actually admire her because she was so beautiful. And the scientists themselves, as they started to create this paradise, because it was paradise on earth, they fell in love with the planet. And they said, well, can we please settle here? So they put a petition to the intergalactic councils and they said, can we colonize the planet? And they said, yes, you can, but you need to then sign a document that says that you are taking part in an experiment in life here. In other words, the experiment can go anywhere, okay? You have free will and choice, but it's an experiment. So just remember that. You're taking part in an experiment here. You're doing it voluntary. It's not because somebody told you to do it. You're doing it voluntarily. And this was literally paradise on earth because they had all the knowledge in the world to co-create with. They could co-create these beautiful cities, these beautiful crystal pyramid temples, and everything was in harmony and in balance and in beauty. But what happened at that time is that the wars of heaven broke out. Now, in my book, I go deeply into what caused the war of heaven. Because the whole intergalactic council at that time consisted of the first 12 master galaxies that were created by the divine. So they were basically the first ever creation of a divine as far as the galactic level was concerned within this universe. Okay. Later on, of course, there were other galaxies and star systems and other universes, etc., etc. But these were now the first, that you could say they're the first creation of a divine. So we were part of that as Earth. But then what happened is suddenly a 13th galaxy appeared out of nowhere that nobody knew about. And then they sort of like took mind control over certain individuals that tried to it. And through that, they literally started to rebel against the rest and the oneness, the unity, etc. And they caused this war of heaven, it was just amazing. It was one of the most, you cannot think of a horrific implications this war has had. Because, for instance, in this solar system, you had the planet Marduk, which was between Mars and Jupiter. And they were totally sort of taken over by this faction, and they blew themselves up. And in the process, you had this whole planet, pieces of planet, sort of like bombarding the Earth and bombarding Mars. That's why Mars looks like it does today, and etc. But what happened is that when the wars of heaven started, the people were evacuated from Earth, so they were not actually here when this all happened, and some actually went inside the Earth. Okay, but what happened is that the Earth was thrown totally out of orbit. You must remember that even galaxies were blown up, even star systems were blown up. So you can imagine what for thousands of Earth years you had this total chaos. In this whole of the universe, it was chaos in the highest degree until everything started settling it down, and you could have space travel again. But you had to sort of now space travel and avoid all the pieces of asteroids and things that were everywhere. That's why you still have this asteroid belt that we can see here from a planet, etc. And every now and again, one passes us, or we go into the main belt. So that is a story of Elysium. That was the first. But then when after the wars of heaven is the Lyrans by that time of Lyra, and they didn't have a home because their galaxy was totally damaged. And so they asked the intergalactic councils, can they please come to Earth and then re-establish that civilization that was here before, because they needed a home, even if it was a temporary home. So they came then and rebuilt the whole civilization as much as they can, because they are with the master architects and engineers. So that was the Lion Kingdom, which was then established. And you must remember then that Elysium didn't look anymore like it used to, because they, even then, parts of it had sort of like sunk under the sea because of the impact of the asteroids, etc. So they established in the second one, which was the Lion Kingdom. But the crystal pyramid temples and everything were then sort of like rebuilt by them. And then these beautiful cities with hanging gardens and architecture that you cannot even imagine. And like what used to be Egypt, etc., where there's desert now, it was lush vegetation, etc. So this whole of the African continent was basically then part of a greater civilization that went out through all the earth. And all the megalithic sites that you have on the earth are the remains of this Lion Kingdom. And they were sort of like a very, very tall redhead race. And if you actually go and read Hancock and you read all those that actually go to these sites and move it, they do say that most people remember it about the red-haired giants that at that stage lived in the earth. So it's Africa in that regard. It's like it is really the cradle of mankind, because from this is where everything else came out about. And at the moment, and it's funny, when I was about 22 years old, the prophecy was made at that stage that it is from Africa that the new earth would be lighted up, and they would lead the way, into the new earth. And that has been confirmed with me actually a few weeks ago. So it's incredible things that are happening in this. But you must remember that all these ancient technology, the ancient knowledge, everything is still there in the earth. It's just that we have forgotten how to access it, and we've forgotten how to utilize it, so that we do not need fossil fuels, and we don't need all these things that we actually destroy Mother Earth, or we rape her in a lot of ways. But we can just use the natural energy forces that were actually created into the earth in the very beginning, what Fox talks about. And I actually saw that when I was in Egypt, because if you look at Egypt and you see that there are gigantic energy systems that are there, they just don't know. They always talk about the sarcophagus, but the sarcophaguses were actually like batteries and energy centers that actually fitted into one gigantic type of energy grid and powerhouse that was there. But you see, it's not that these things are not there. It's not that people don't know it, but they put the wrong sort of labels on them when they don't realize that this is actually a very highly advanced technological system that we've forgotten how to use.
Yes. And I love the way that everything shows itself to you when you were going on your journey through Africa, and the veils were lifting so that you could see how things looked at that time. You could see the actual crystal pyramids, and your relationship with nature and with Earth herself, and the respect that you show, that you are asking for permission first. I love that. When we were as a family traveling in Thailand a few years ago, I noticed that the people there would create little altars before they did anything on any area of land. So they would create a little altar if they wanted to build a home or a business or anything, and it was like you were doing, asking permission first and showing respect. And then you would see these guardians appearing, and then the veils would lift for you. And there's such a huge lesson there for all of us to go back to that reverence of nature and these realms that are hidden to us until we come from the heart and we are truly able to see. I think it's so beautiful the way you show us that in your book.
Thank you. Yeah, it's happened to me in France too, because, I never go into any place, and even in Egypt and in Greece when I was there, I never go anywhere without calling in the guardians and keepers and asking permissions if I can enter, because it's a token of respect. You don't just barge into people's houses. And the thing is, you've got to remember that the most sacred sites on earth are not the ones that people mostly know about it, because there are many other sacred sites that were deliberately hidden from humankind because they didn't want the energy to be disturbed, because they don't want people to just go in there and try to use this technology or the energy for the wrong purposes, like has happened time and time again, because history has actually shown that we have a great tendency to always self-destruct ourselves. So we always get to the stage where we have everything, and then some faction always goes and uses the same thing for the wrong ends, or try or destroy what has been before. So the great lesson we've now got to master is not to do this, not to self-destruct, but to actually move into our mastery again. So I always, at wherever I go, even if I go walking and hiking in anywhere, I will always just stop and just ask for the guardians and keepers to open the way. If I am at the site, even if it's like in the pyramids in Egypt, I just stopped and at the swings, and I asked and I called in the guardians and keepers. Even with the tour group that was with me, I taught them that. I said, you just stop and you ask the guardians and the keepers. And it's funny how they will actually show themselves. Actually, when one place in Egypt where I refused to go in, and when I called in the guardians and people, I couldn't access them. And I thought to myself, well, this is interesting. What happened here? And then after a while, they actually showed themselves, and they were bound. So somebody had actually taken them and bound them, and they couldn't, and we had to release them. And once they released, they were actually able to show themselves and move in again. And then the whole energy of the place changed. It was quite incredible, but it's another lesson that I learned there, how important it is. But when I was in France, for instance, we were at, was called to open up a mystery school of Mary Magdalene there. It is on a plateau, which is just outside Rennes-le-Château. And we were the group sort of met at La Bourrie, which is down at the valley below. So we had to sort of go up the mountain or the hill, to get to that plateau. I have never been stopped so many times in my life because we couldn't move. And I was showing those with me. I said, okay, today I'm going to teach you the lesson of the guardians and the keepers. Because as we proceeded up the hill, we stopped. And then I said, okay, can I get permission to enter? And I said to those with me, my students, I said, now go and have a look. See how this mountain changes. I want you to have your cameras ready, and I want you to now look at this mountain and look at it as you see it now. And as we go up step by step by step, see how it looks differently. By the time we got to the top, they said to me that this is not the same mountain anymore. I said, it's the same mountain, but you see how they opened up for you to see the truth of the mountain as it is in its truth, because that was one of the most sacred places. But you see, if they want to keep people off it, they will just bounce you off the path. You will not be able to enter where the holies of holies is, because they will not let you enter if your intent is not pure. If you actually come to destruct or destroy or to do whatever, they just will not do it. You will just feel spooked off. You will feel like, okay, I can't go here. I must got to go somewhere else. You might even get frightened and go off. But if you start asking permission, the whole energy changes. You see the landscape changes. You start seeing suddenly what you couldn't see before. And that to them was such a lesson that afterwards they often said to me, I always do this now. Wherever I go, I call in the guardians, I call in the tweet. And as you say, the whole thing, you feel welcomed. You feel as if love is in the place. And everything changes, the energy changes, because now the elementals will show themselves to you where you didn't see them before, like the fairies and the gnomes. And I mean, they're just as real as we are. But humankind also at one stage wanted to enslave them, like at Atlantis. And then they just said, well, okay, if that's what you want to do with it, we won't work with humankind anymore until we start reading your intent and we can see that you will come and work with us in love and so on. And that's why also you will find that a lot of these places, you will have little altars or people make an offering with a stone or a prayer with a stone or something. In Africa, you'll often find that they will leave stones, wherever it is, and pile them up and say that's like. But they're very careful about entering any place without asking permission. And that is what I think is that we have to really learn to understand that we won't have access to the higher dimension until we come with pure intent, until we come and ask permission, if we can enter, if we can move, if we can work with these energies. And then once that permission is granted, you will find a whole new world opens up. But you couldn't see. You see, it's like you couldn't see it before because you were not open for it.
It makes me think of Lemuria, and how this time now is us returning to that frequency within our hearts again, that we are moving from the head to the heart, because there was a time where we chose as a collective to move away from the heart and into the head, hence Atlantis and all the disasters that ensued, but also understanding on soul level that there were lessons there to learn too. But I do feel that this is a huge returning back to Lemuria now, for us as a humanity, for those who choose to return to the heart and to live from there and to see, like you were mentioning, this new dimension that we never knew existed but was there, but it was just hidden from us. Would you share with us a little about the white flame of purity to close, because I know you've done extensive work connecting with this light and with this frequency, and it is a huge part of you and what you share and your light.
Yeah. I was brought back to the crystal pyramid of a temple of a white flame, and that is in my book because I've got the sketches of that. And I was also brought back to the recall that I was one of them when Atlantis fell. We had to safeguard that white flame because a white flame is a divine mother flame. It's a flame of purity, but it's also the flame of a Christ consciousness. It's a flame of the sacred tones, the sacred geometries, the sacred knowledge, which was kept in the white flame because it incorporates all the other colors. It's like the purest flame there is of knowledge, of enlightenment, of illumination. And I was there with Thoth. We were actually I saw this, and I saw that the mothership from Andromeda came and took the white flame away, so that it could not be abused by those who took over Atlantis, because they were just out on destructing anything, and they actually nearly blew up the earth. The intergalactic councils at that stage had to intervene because they said, no ways are you doing the war of weapons again. We had it. We don't ever want that ever happen again. So they literally, that's why the great floods then happened. But you can imagine, like pieces of land tore off, lots of it sunk under the sea. And the earth was totally sort of revamped and recreated in that stage. But the white flame recently, this last few, I think since about May, the white flame is being returned in its greatest moments. It was always held a little, the sort of say a spark of it was held in the etheric over Luxor in Egypt, by Serapis Bay. He's the ascended master that works with the white flame and Isis. So they held it there. So when I was in Egypt, I was working with this, and I had to activate that whole energy grid again, but I had to do it through France and Greece. Interestingly enough, sort of like coming inside and then knitting it back into that longitude line again. But now it's being returned in a great way, because I've had done extensive work with the Giza pyramids and remotely with that whole area again, because it literally is opening up the spinal column now in the highest degree. As the new spinal column of the new earth is now merging with the spinal column of the old earth. The new earth is already here, because it's been here since the 5th of July last year, as the old earth now is disintegrating. And this is what's happening now. You see, everything is now coming up that needs to be removed, that needs to disintegrate, because it can no longer hold form. That's why so many souls will leave the planet, mainly because they don't choose to be here, mainly because their contracts are over. And that is basically what's happening. But the white flame is also the flame of purification. It's busy purifying. It's busy moving into the bowls of the earth, and it's literally pushing up all the muck and the dirt and the darkness that we ever created. And so it's all coming to the surface now, so that this can all be transmuted, it be lifted and be changed, so that we can literally be transfigured into the new embodiment and the new life that awaits us in the new earth. And that is already here. So it's up for us now to leave the old life behind, the old Adam, the old Eve, all that we created that in the 3D. It's now dissipating, it's moving, it's gone. So it is a whole transitional phase that we are going through at immense rate. And this white flame is actually helping us to lift us now into that new earth. Because the minute that we start working with it, we are purified. We will find that everything starts that is not serving us anymore will just move out of our lives. We will just not go into that. We will not interact with people like we did before, because we are lifted now off that. We are rising into that new earth, where whatever happened here in the lower earth cannot affect us anymore. We are in a new embodiment there. And it actually, I was shown, for instance, the Ark of a Covenant, which I never knew, but it's interesting, because I was kind of thinking, what has got the white flame got to do with the Ark of a Covenant? But I'm always being brought back to it. I thought to myself, well, this is very interesting, because I was doing work in Jerusalem as well. And I thought to myself, well, this is getting more and more interesting now. How does all of this come together? And so interesting, how if you start asking questions, you will always get answers, okay? Now, remember I told you that we had that natural energy of the earth, and that these crystal pyramids were all using the same natural energy of the earth and the same type of energy, and it could power everything. Well, sure as nuts, one day I'm just going and I want to actually listen to music on YouTube, and they're advertising this video. I thought to myself, oh, this is interesting. Okay, let me listen to it. And sure as nuts, there's my answer. That they actually found that the dimension of the ark, as is given in the Bible, fits exactly into the king's chamber box. So in other words, it was a box that belonged, that energy box, that energy charging box that fitted exactly into that, what they call a sarcophagus, which is never a sarcophagus, in the king's chamber. So that shows you that the Giza pyramids was built on exactly the same principles as the other pyramids, as powerhouses. So in other words, the same energy of the white flame was anchored into Giza pyramids and all the pyramids there, which I found when I was in Egypt. I was actually sitting itself. And those whole boxes that are there at Saqqara and so on, everything fits together as one gigantic machine. And the white flame is busy returning this knowledge to humankind. So to me, it's like, okay, we are living in amazing times. where all of this is being activated. So we are now literally being lifted into the new earth. And I'm literally shown that two people will stand next to each other. The one will be lifted, the other one will be left behind. And that all these prophecies that were prophesied so many years ago are actually now coming into the being and form.
Wow, that's incredible. And because we hear lots of speak about these crystalline frequencies and these crystalline gridworks coming online again, and so it's these frequencies, this white flame, this Christed white flame, and how this assists in creating a new foundation so that we can build upon that, this new earth that we're entering into.
Yeah.
So it's incredible.
Yeah. The white flame is here and it's really activating. And it's interesting because they were telling me that the crystals are moving into a higher dimension already. We have to actually ask them. You've got to ask them, like you ask your guardian and your keepers. You need to ask the elemental in the crystal. And you ask them and you say, will you work with me to help me through this shift into this? And interesting, and also it is very important that we create that same sacred temple of the white flame within our homes now. You know, I actually the other day, I because it's all sacred geometries, and these crystals will immediately know how to activate these sacred grids. You just ask them and find. What I did is I just take it in my hands and I say, will you please ask, will you help me to create this, co-create it? And you can literally feel it. Say, yeah, we will do it. and you will actually find that because they also read your intent. If your intent is not pure, they will not help you. They finish with it because it's also because of the way they were abused in Atlantis, because Atlantis actually used atomic lasers that they actually had crystals in, to do all the destruction. So the Crystal Kingdom said, we will not help humanity if that is the way they're going. So if you actually realize that all crystals are recording devices anyway, they record just as much as the ethers do and the energy fields. So they're living beings. You start asking them, how to can you work with me? Can you help me raise this whole area's consciousness? Do it. It's actually during my travels, for instance, when I first started my book, I just got into this. It was so misty there, I couldn't see where it was going. And I ended up in somebody's backyard. And this woman just appeared in front of me in the mist. And she said, oh, my goodness, you came in with the wrong gate. I said, well, what gate should I have used? She said, well, the crystal shop's gate is different than that, because I was in the back of the house where the crystal shop was instead of the front. So I said, excuse me, I didn't even know there was a crystal shop here. But in any case, I got to know them. And it's so beautiful because the woman who owned the crystal shop, she had two little boys. Okay. These little boys were totally tuned into these crystals, and they were the star children. And they used to get up this mother in the middle of the night and they said, Mom, we've got to go and put these crystals in the ground. You've got to take this crystal, you've got to take that crystal. And in the pitch dark, they would go and plant these crystals exactly where the kids told her to do that. And then my estimation of these kids actually wrote, because they know this, they know how to use all this technology. We've forgotten about it. And now you will find that with these new children, they will tell you even more. So go listen to what these children tell you, because they have a knowledge that we have forgotten about. And this is now coming to the fore. We need to understand that we're working now with new technology that is being returned. And this whole thing of this huge awakening is coming to the awakening of spirituality again. In other words, it's the opening of the heart, as you say. Your heart is filled with love. Now you can co-create with love and in love, and for the greater good of all, not for self-service, but for the greater unity, the greater good. And that is what now is happening. We're getting out of this, that we use our head and we destruct. Because in the end, if your heart is closed, you destruct. because that is what you're creating. If you come into a state of love and you are as one with the divine, embracing the divinity within, you cannot go and create something that will destroy and destruct. It's impossible.
That is such a beautiful way to close the conversation today, Judith. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your space with me, and I hope we can speak again soon. So much
Thank
love.
you so much.
So much love.
Thank you very much. I so appreciate it. And thank you for all that you're doing. And thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.